AI. I am the Vice President of Communications here at Volaris Group, and really excited to host today's session with a stellar panel. As we get started, I just wanted to offer a quick disclaimer. As I'm sure everybody on the call can understand, AI is a fast-moving technology, and things are moving quickly. None of us can predict the future, so I just ask that you all take a moment here just to consider our disclaimer as we enter this. Today's session is offered for information and educational purposes, and we are hoping you can enjoy it in that context. Excellent. So just to give you a bit about Volaris Group, I'm sure many of you know we are a buy and hold acquirer of vertical market software businesses, meaning we acquire great software companies and we never sell them. As a team, we then focus on both growing those businesses and growing the leaders inside those businesses. We do that through sharing best practices, continuous learning, and investing in leadership and product inside those businesses. We'll have some time today for Q&A with the panel, so we'd encourage you to think of some questions as we move through the session, and you'll be able to enter those questions using a chat function throughout the panel discussion. The session will be recorded, so no need to take notes today. We'll send out that recording following the session, and also give you all an advance copy of our just soon to be launched AI white paper, which we're kicking off today. So just to quickly pivot to our panel, we've got a stellar group today. First being Jeff Chow, our VP of Integration and Strategy here at Volaris Group. Jeff leads a team of experts that are helping our companies address the business challenges they face post-acquisition. And we have Glynn Trott, who's the CEO of agentOS. agentOS joined Volaris Group in 2024, and Glynn's been working with our team post-acquisition to help create the next phase of growth for agentOS inside the Volaris family. Much of that work at the moment for you, Glynn and team, I know relates to how the company is navigating this changing world of AI. So thank you both, Jeff and Glynn, for joining us today. We really appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Excellent. So we'll pivot into a couple of questions we've got for both of you. I think maybe, Jeff, starting with you, AI's been described as both an opportunity and a threat for vertical market software companies. From your vantage point inside Volaris, what do you see as the biggest misconception that VMS leaders have about AI at the moment?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. So I think there's a lot of hype in the market right now, right? We're hearing stories of VCs throwing billions of dollars at AI, AI native startups claiming they can, produce things at a 10x velocity. CEOs out there talking about changing their workforce due to AI. And so there is a lot of hype. And I think one of the most common misconceptions that I'm hearing from our leaders is this notion that, AI is magic. The idea that you buy a solution, turn on the switch, and you start seeing value and impact immediately. I think the reality is, to actually be able to achieve some of these kind of claims that, AI native startups are claiming around, a developer can now produce 10,000 lines of code, in a day. It takes a real investment in AI to make that happen, right? I don't think you can actually capitalize on this opportunity if you don't really have this community of peers to learn from. You're unable to share best practices, learn what's good, what's bad, what worked, what didn't. And you don't actually carve out meaningful time, resources, talent for experimentation, right? A handful of our businesses are going through this journey right now. And what we're really seeing is it does take a lot of time to set up those foundations, right? Those principles, changing those workflows before you can start moving a lot faster.
It really is about carving out that time, resources, and talent for experimentation, right? And I think, what we're seeing in the businesses that are going through this journey, you really need to take that step back, really think about the principles, the workflow, the underlying foundation before you could start moving a lot faster. And one kind of anecdotal example from one of our businesses is they actually went ahead and stopped their sprint cycles. They actually put kind of full stop to their development for a couple of weeks to actually go and figure all of this out, right? And so they really went back to rethinking how they go about using and becoming AI first. So the concept of using AI as a thought partner, how could it help with architecture, requirements, gathering, et cetera, using AI as a builder, helping with actually, hands-on keyboard coding, testing of the code as it came out, and then thinking about how they can enable this human paradigm shift around the fact that everybody now on their team is fully AI enabled, right? It's no longer people are no longer individual contributors, but rather they're now orchestrators or managers of teams of agents. And by taking that time and kind of reinventing the ways of working, they've actually gone a heck of a lot faster. They've now accelerated where they've actually completed their kind of committed to product development roadmap already kind of midway through the year, and they're now looking to add more capabilities and build more features into their product, right? So I think there is a tremendous opportunity. What we're starting to see right now is AI has proven that it can add significant productivity to R&D teams, right? So once you can figure this out, how you can best deploy, leverage, use agentic coding tools, and change the SDLC processes, you can start prototyping and building a lot faster. So ultimately, the opportunity is, your business will spend a lot less time maintaining code, right? Like digging through your legacy code base, fixing bugs, optimizing performance, and a lot more time building something new to unlock revenue opportunities. On the threat angle, I think one of the things that we're seeing, I would say twofold. One is we are seeing evidence of some more vertical startups entering, typically narrow market spaces for our businesses, right? So there's definitely more competition coming in. And I think secondly, AI is starting to raise our customers' expectations. So the idea, similar to how Amazon has, next day shipping, and if you're in the retail space, you can't compete unless you can also offer that. I think we're going to start seeing more of that as customers are familiar and they're starting to see, news articles, examples of people building products overnight and scaling up features and capabilities a lot quicker. I think that same expectation will eventually start going towards our businesses. They're going to expect that we can build things faster and we can provide very similar agentic engines in our products that a lot of the kind of big competitors do. What I would say is these threats probably only really materialize if we don't take AI seriously and stay on the sidelines and wait for people to figure this out. Hopefully that answers kind of the question.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And Glynn, I want to give you a chance to kind of add your commentary into that idea of building an AI first sort of organizational structure, because I know you've been thinking a bit about that. But I think it's also an interesting question to ask about how real this risk of competition is, how you've been thinking about the niche competitors addressing other areas that agentOS had in the past.
Yeah, so we've been looking at two sides of AI. So one is within our own business, our own VBU, in terms of getting those efficiencies that give us capacity that we can then get our team and our people to move away from that mundane work and move on to that high value work, and then into our own product. But just adding a bit to what Jeff was talking about is there's been a lot of focus on AI and coding and then content creation. And we see other use cases, and as you mentioned, Jeff, the thought partner, but also deal opportunity creation. So a good example is we have an AI dashboard that helps our clients navigate software and query their data. So we take what they're prompting in there, and then we use AI to look against our professional services catalog and our applications catalog to create opportunities. So it goes way beyond just coding software and generating content. So when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it to amplify my business. So somebody can come along, and I call it rip off and duplicate, try and copy our platform. But we've got our customers, we've got good relationships, we understand their market very well, and then we have those conversations to understand their challenges and pain points. So we've been working on putting AI agents on top of the views of our technology. So it allows an AI agent to do whatever a user does. And it's quite a technical challenge, and we got there. But what it's now allowing us to do is build these baseline automations or baseline prompts that can do exactly what their people and their teams can do. And what I'm finding with that now is as we start to build those baseline, our customers will come in and start making them complicated, because their processes, their businesses, are unique to them. And as they adopt those agents, they're really starting to make it what I call pleasantly complex. And that's really locking in their stickiness. So when somebody coming along replicates our software, they're not just replicating the software, they've got to really replicate those flows. They've got to overcome that stickiness. So actually, it's not just about switching a customer with migrating data. You've suddenly got to lift and understand and move all of their AI business workflows.
And so, Glynn, as a CEO who's lived through multiple sort of eras of technology change, not to date you in this conversation, but I'm wondering how you're viewing this AI era and shift to AI versus some of those other areas. Do you see things as similar, or are there differences here?
It's definitely differences. So I started business in the late 90s, and people were just getting websites, and I came from the real estate space. So people were very dismissive of it. And then in 2004, we launched agentOS as a SaaS offering and a cloud product, and I couldn't sell it because, again, people weren't ready. The difference then was once businesses had realized that they kind of made a mistake, it would only take them weeks or months to make that transition to get websites or to move to SaaS or cloud solutions. The difference here now is what I call the AI compound effect. Every time you're adopting AI and bringing it into your business and your product, every hour of that day, you get the benefit, a bit like daily interest on your money. But this time it's with your talent and your teams. It's with the opportunity and the efficiencies and the gaining the capacity. So the real challenge now is if you are slow to adopting AI in your own business and even with our customers, then you're losing out on that compound effect. And a really good example we can see happening right in front of us is how far behind Facebook is with ChatGPT and say Claude. And actually, as an AI consumer myself, I'm not even thinking about using Facebook for any AI tools, even if they entered into the marketplace for doing tools for development, because they're so far behind. So it's really challenging for them to even catch up to where ChatGPT is and Claude, let alone leapfrog them. Same principles here if within a software business and with our own customers. You leave it too late, and your competitors are just going to get that AI compound effect building and building and building. And then when you do decide to go, you've got a real challenge on yourself to catch up, let alone leapfrog them.
That's a great example. Jeff, I think there's a kind of a truth to vertical market software companies where we have historically relied on customer intimacy and familiarity with customers' compliance and governance needs as a strong competitive advantage. How sustainable do you think that advantage is inside this new world of AI?
Yeah, I think there are certain things that AI does incredibly well, but there's certain things it can't do. And I think, one thing, and Glynn kind of alluded to that in his response, is it can't go and visit customers, build a real relationship, use that relationship to tease out pain points and brainstorm solutions to solve them, right? I think from our perspective, one of the key things is, trying to find ways for our businesses, again, to use AI to shift away from these types of repetitive, low value tasks, so that they can actually spend more time with customers to reinforce that intimacy. That's kind of, I think, the strategy or the key to unlocking all of this is using AI as a bit of a catalyst for transformation of the business, and then spend way more time, again, all that low level granular tactical stuff is all hopefully gone. And you can spend way more time reinforcing that kind of head start you have against kind of startups around that understanding of customer, industry, and pain points.
Mm-hmm. And Glynn, it seems like one area where you probably have been building out an understanding of your customer are the challenges that they themselves are faced with around AI. So do you see specific areas in your business where this has become an issue, and how did you respond to those customer questions and needs around AI?
They're very unsure. That they, particularly some of my larger corporate clients, they're just really unsure of their strategy. So there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of people saying they can help support. So actually, what's been interesting for me is as I've been developing our strategy, learning and understanding, and this has moved quite quickly. I didn't really pick the strategy up until March this year, when Jeff and Chris and the team gave a presentation. And at that point, I suddenly realized I had to take action really quickly. And then a month later, I had to present back to Rob Turner and the team, just say what I thought my strategy was. So as I've gone on through that journey, that's helped me really understand our strategy. One being we're focusing on what we call AI and people work charts, really how we embed AI into our processes, and then AI into our product with no-code APIs, no-code MCPs, the AI agents I spoke about earlier. But what's been interesting is as I've developed the strategy and shared the strategy with a lot of the other leaders and peers in the Volaris group, clarified those thoughts, I've then used that and gone and shared that with some of my key clients. And the reaction has been really strong because it's given them clarity. It's really strengthened my relationship. So a really good example, one of my PLC companies, they asked me to present further up the chain, which we're arranging. And it's actually had a knock-on effect. And just by chance, next Wednesday, I'm actually having lunch with the PLC's CEO just to talk about it. So customers are as unsure as sort of some of us have been when we've gone on this journey. So actually, when you're sharing your thoughts and strategies and giving that clarity, it strengthens the relationship. And just that, one of my favorite examples is, I just explained, if you don't have MCP, if you don't have the ability for AI to connect to software, then that software is pretty useless to you in some respects. So I was just sharing a business solution I'm using in my business that doesn't have this MCP connection to AI, we're getting rid of. It's no good to us because we can't join it up. But with my client, I was going with them, you've got a CRM system in the other part of your business that doesn't have an MCP. One day, and very soon, your customer, who are, I think they're big house builders in the UK, are going to come along and say, and the question will be, I just need to connect my AI to my data. So there's a real opportunity to be a thought leader with customers, to really help them navigate that sort of journey that they're going through, and just to help sort of really strengthen that relationship.
Right. Any disruption we're facing, our customers are also likely facing. So it's an important area of growth. So Glynn alluded a bit here to some of the knowledge sharing efforts that we've made across the organization. I'd say that's a huge part of the Volaris culture and a huge way that we've embraced this challenge. Jeff, maybe you could speak a bit to this. I know your team is out there all the time engaging with our businesses, helping sort of coach and mentor and guide folks across this. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that kind of knowledge sharing model is working inside Volaris and how it's helping prepare leaders for AI.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So just a bit of context, my team does spend a lot of time in this sort of incubator, innovation, kind of futurist role, thinking about AI and how it can drive value in VMS businesses. But at the same time, a big part of our mandate is how do we scale this up across the enterprise? Like take all of those great learnings that we see and then bring that to the rest of our businesses. And we're doing it across, I would say, 4 key kind of activities right now. One is this, we have we're calling essentially an AI developer training program. And I'll get to more details kind of on the afterwards, but we've got AI developer training programs that is running. We've got productivity accelerators. We have secondments, and we have AI functional working groups. So in terms of the AI developer program, what we're doing is we're running our business units, their technical teams, through a 6-week training program to upskill their developers in AI first development practices, right? So I think, a lot of our businesses, they have the tools, they have, ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, et cetera. But it really is about teaching them sort of principles. How do you effectively prompt? How do you think about agent usage on those tools to really maximize that productivity gain? And so that's really the focus of the training program. The second being the productivity accelerators. We regularly partner with our portfolios and our businesses to run these hackathon style events where we bring together folks from the business, technical resources, et cetera, to experiment and build AI use cases. And I think there's kind of 2 key benefits. One is it really accelerates the learning journey of the participants because, we ascribe to this whole 70-20-10 learning journey. The idea is you really need to spend a lot of time actually in this space, building, experimenting. That's the best way to learn, right? And then I think the second benefit is, we are bringing together a lot of different people from different businesses with many different perspectives to rapidly iterate and identify good scalable AI use cases. And I think, Glynn and I actually just came back from a productivity accelerator. So I might actually just pass it over to Glynn real quick before I talk about the other things we're doing, just to share, highlights and thoughts from that event.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had a group of data and security individuals, and they had a use case to produce AI sort of focused productivity platform, so they could combine the buying power of different businesses. But what surprised me is that two of the members in the team had zero knowledge, zero skill, and actually used the word fear. And by the end of the day, once we'd gone through and proven what could be achieved and built, and within 6 hours, we built a minimal viable product that could combine these orders and demonstrate value. It gave prompts for negotiating with the different suppliers. It gave the prompts had given the information for the sort of best value offerings out there. But what really surprised me, they really started pushing the use cases. So we suddenly went to, well, why are we not generating a platform for CSI level where we can wrap up what the entire group's buying to get a sense of scale of how many people have bought HubSpot and what's the total value, and then again prompting this negotiation. So in that short period, we took a team of I think it was about 10 individuals. By the end of it, we not only had a product within 6 hours, minimal viable product to demonstrate, but their knowledge had rapidly increased because they were delivering the prompts and the artifacts. We were just bringing it together in a platform. And also the excitement and energy surprised me a lot, because that evening we had food and drinks. What they were excited about, what they had learned and what they could take back was really powerful. And I really just sort of echo what Jeff's saying, is that intensity piece together can really highlight how quick and how much more you can learn with that group. And even myself and my CTO consider ourselves, pretty good with with AI and how to approach it. We learned a lot. We came away from that just thinking, wow, we can actually go a lot faster than we can realize we can go. So that productivity accelerator event was just incredible. And actually, when you spoke to the other teams that we were up against, it was a bit of a competition. The level of skill and knowledge that had been developed in a day was just staggering.
Yeah, and we found this as like a great way to build, effectively build AI champions, right? So they're going to obviously, they spent 24 hours rapidly prototyping, living in AI, and it's kind of dedicated, focused time, but they're going to be able to now bring that thinking back to their business and continue to scale AI across the enterprise. The third thing that we're doing is really around secondment. So we actually have people from our businesses seconded at the Volaris corporate team. And this is about ensuring some dedicated learning opportunity and AI projects so that they can figure out how do they apply AI into VMS businesses. And then once they're kind of done with that secondment, the idea is they go back into their business and continue to kind of build from there. And then the last thing is we have these AI functional working groups. So these are kind of functional leaders from across all of our enterprise, meeting monthly to share, discuss, and brainstorm applied AI opportunities at our businesses. And the idea is we really want to, again, just the AI can tackle such a broad problem set. So what we're really doing and focused on is bringing kind of the best of the best to accelerate thinking and break down these knowledge silos.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what these kind of focus moments of learning can really do for helping bring people along on this journey. It's quite inspiring. Good takeaway for folks there. Glynn, on the question of how sort of teams are responding to AI adoption, I know that if we look at news coverage, there is a swath of concerns around job replacement, disruption, economic change, etc. I wonder if you can maybe speak to how your employees are following you along on this journey. What techniques have you used to help them embrace AI in their work and sort of transform the way they're working?
Yeah, no problem at all. Even though we're really driven to be an AI first VDU, I still have people in the company with lots of concerns, so they do have these concerns. If I identify areas that can be automated or AI can help, I could be so obviously putting myself out of a job. And also, again, lots of questions I just don't understand the use cases, or I tried it and the output was rubbish. So, even though we're heavily adopting AI in the business and in product, I still have people on the team that are still struggling with the transition. So I do spend a lot of time talking about, which is what Jeff and the team had introduced us to, was the notion of a T-shaped career. So just a very simple, if I'm a developer, that's my core understanding, but I now need to get this generalized understanding across the top, because AI breaks down those silos of expertise. So that developer can suddenly sit in front of the client and transcribe and be client facing to identify the needs, and they can go all the way through and prompt and build the code, but then they can also start to build the sales and marketing aspect as well. So I really spend a lot of people time with my people to say to develop your T-shaped career, because when you do, and particularly AI, you're going to become a lot more valuable, and that's the reality. We took to a next level where we introduced OKRs, KPIs on AI. And what we realized is not everyone in the company is a builder, but what you do want is everyone in the company using AI and identifying it. So they have an OKR of go and either learn, identify, adopt, build, utilize 35 hours a quarter. And that's really starting to help us channel all that energy into getting more AI adoption in the business, as well as then starting to identify use cases for us to be building into the product. A good example is I have one colleague who's sort of probably older than me, and she's quite worried about the AI. But actually what she's really good at is identifying inefficiencies. This could be dealt with. So actually that contribution is really valuable because it's hunting out those use cases that we can quickly turn around and get that AI compound effect benefit. But the OKR, the KPI also is really starting to identify the people that are not going to be on the journey with us. And, it's really starting to highlight if they're unable to make that transition and willing to, because this is not just about I'm going to code with AI. This is about how I change my practices from using AI to be a thought leader, to be, challenge, I call it sort of sparring, to using AI to manage my time better in terms of output. So, for me, getting people to really acknowledge and measure their hours in that whole spectrum around AI, from learning to utilization, really starts to highlight, who's on the journey, but on, who's not, and also it just helps them where do they need to focus their time and learnings.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like you're approaching these conversations with a lot of empathy and humanity for where those employees actually are in the journey, and kind of understanding that folks are going to have different trajectories depending on how they embrace these tools. So it's quite inspiring. Jeff, when we could maybe move this back up to a macro level, many leaders worry about the ROI of these AI projects. So I'm wondering, in your experience looking at the business, do you have kind of practical frameworks that you'd recommend for identifying those high impact opportunities? And then maybe also help folks understand what's the cost of doing nothing on this front, right? There's obviously costs on both sides.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's not rocket science, right? This probably goes back to more the standard kind of any sort of business case process. I would say there's probably kind of three key criteria that you need to think about. One is obviously feasibility, right? Like, is the problem you're trying to solve clear? Is there data available? If you go and do this, will end users adopt the change, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is around value, right? Is it actually solving a pain point? How frequent is this happening? Is this actual, if you solve this issue, is that outcome actually measurable, right? Because a lot of times if you can't measure this gain, then it probably isn't that painful to begin with. And then I think the last criteria is really approach. Is this the right approach to actually solve the problem, right? There's lots of tools out there. There's many different approaches, but sometimes they're not right for AI, right? Sometimes it might be just better to do automation versus actually going to do, something as using agentic AI. Or sometimes you might be, if you need a forecast, financials, it might be a better predictive AI use case. So really understanding, is this the actually appropriate approach, is also really, really important along the way, right? I think kind of in summary, it's really, again, treat it like any other business case. You need to know feasibility, whether you can execute against it, whether it actually adds value to your business, and whether AI is actually the appropriate tool. Because what you don't really want to be doing is making these shiny AI tools that look really cool and they're awesome and they're using agentic capabilities, but at the end of the day, it's actually not solving that business problem that you actually needed to solve. On that sort of cost of doing nothing or cost of inaction, I think Glynn alluded to this a little bit earlier, but we're in this rapidly evolving landscape, and there is this snowball effect. If you don't do anything and you're not in the arena kind of experimenting and trying to understand what is possible, what can it do, how can you take advantage, you're going to be very quickly left behind, and you're not going to be able to catch up. You're just going to end up kind of further and further behind, right? One of the things that we've been really pushing to a lot of our businesses is you got to jump in, right? You got to start experimentation, right? But I would say what we've really encouraged is just not continual experimentation, but experimentation with kind of a finite sort of time box around it, right? So you've got to have, you're going to experiment, say, for a month on AI, and if you can find impact and value and feasibility, double down there. If you cannot find that, you need to stop and pull the plug really quickly, or else you're just wasting money, right? That's kind of how we think about it at the Volaris level.
Yeah, it's good. I've got maybe one more for you, Glynn, before we pivot into Q&A from the audience. Just as a reminder, the folks on the line, you can enter your questions into the Q&A box there. We'll take some time to address those with the panel, so please feel free to add your questions into the list. But Glynn, as a CEO who's navigated both acquisition and AI adoption simultaneously, you had a lot of change bearing down on you. I wonder what advice you might give for your peers kind of evaluating a similar situation, and wonder sort of whether how they might navigate this question of whether they're looking for to make an investment in AI inside their own business, or looking for a partner for that next chapter, and how they might be weighing those options.
Okay, yeah. So it's really setting the urgency around it. So within my teams, we came up with the first hour of the day. It was just too easy to get caught up in the mundane work as you go through every single day, and then sort of say, oh, we'll dedicate Friday to some AI work. So it started actually with the IT team. So they were meeting first hour a day, and the importance there was what we're building, where are we at, and sometimes you go really, really quickly. It was actually sharing, because it's not always your technical leads that have the skill sets. A good example for me is Cam is one of our sort of support people with good technical knowledge, but he's actually a great builder, whereas one of my senior developers is so caught up in writing code, they're not experimenting enough in that area. So by coming together on the first hour of the day, they're sharing, and then they're actually learning in a field that's fast evolving from that side. So when somebody says, well, this won't work, somebody else can say, well, it can now. It changed last week. And then in that first hour, they're really then focusing in what do we need to work on next. So our approach, as I alluded to earlier, is just what's called, I called it an AI and people work chart. So we've just moved to what jobs need to get done. Without getting into too much detail, you kind of move away from an org chart structure to what jobs need to get done. In the support world, the outcome, the goal is to keep attrition low. I don't want to lose customers, and it starts with a conversation. So as you go through that track, what needs to get done, map it out, and then you're starting to look and build. That first hour of the day now is extended really to the senior management team. So that's getting everyone in the organization focused. What can we work on today? What should we build in today? And if we are on a bigger build, where are we at? And then after that hour, they're kind of getting caught up in the rest of the day-to-day business piece. And just coming back to something Jeff said as well, in terms of focus when doing the build, we had this case just highlighted to me why this first hour was so important. And we sat around for about, I think it was 6 weeks, talking about AI automation within our Zendesk ticketing system. What we were going to do, how we were going to use it, and developing it. And when Cam went to start to build it, he was out in 3 hours. He was done. And it highlighted to me I'd lost that compound effect for 6 weeks because we were talking more about it. So you truly don't know what you can do until you can start to build. Experimentation is good, but what I would add, is have a really solid goal at the end there, where you're going, we're aiming to do this, not I'm just going to go and find out what a voice agent can do, because you really do go down a rabbit hole of just where it can take you. You always need that, you know, that very much that focus from that side. So really, yeah, just my advice to everyone is to you know, focus every day. Coming back to, do I do it internal or do I get somebody from outside? I think reality is most businesses have got the talent within the business. There's been lots of reports over the last 2 to 3 years of AI usage bottom up. People using AI in their personal lives outside, and it's only really in the last, I say, 12 to 18 months, it's coming from the top down, where people are now saying, let's start to implement. So I think we're surprised if you go and do a talent check within your organization, you'll find those people that have some of those skills from that side. When it goes to outside, I'm always a little bit skeptical, because people will say, we can do these things. And then when you go and ask them, all they're doing is prompting how to do it, which you can do. So, you know, whenever we get stuck, we just go, just go to Claude and put in there, how do I build this? What are the challenges? When we get stuck, how do we overcome? And actually really quickly, then you see that you get all those benefits internally. And also you're developing, you're learning your capacity, or what we call AI literacy, very rapidly. So my preference is definitely look inside first. But then obviously externally, I've got a great opportunity in the sense of we get to work with Jeff, the team. I get to talk to other businesses in Volaris who are doing some great work. And actually that those Teams channel chit chats are pretty valuable, because when you've got a problem, you go, I'm facing this problem, you get a lot of support and input back.
That's excellent. We've got a bunch of questions coming in, so maybe we can pivot to some audience questions. There's a few folks that have raised some questions around developer productivity and the use of AI coding tools. I recognize we maybe can't assess this at some macro level across the company, but maybe if you could both sort of speak to how you're seeing AI as a change agent within our development teams, and is there some ways that we're sort of using that as an accelerant for AI across the business? For developers specifically.
Sure. I can jump in first. Again, I think, you know, a lot of our businesses are adopting these agentic coding tools. Where we're seeing kind of productivity gains, you know, again, don't have tons of specific kind of percentages off the top of my head, but really at the end of the day, it's around kind of helping with navigating the code base, testing, documenting the code, debugging, and kind of helping with architecture and kind of functional requirements, right? So a lot of those kind of, you know, tasks within the SDLC do take a lot of time, and we're seeing, you know, pretty solid increases in terms of productivity, less time spent on those types of tasks and items, you know, at a lot of our businesses, right? I would also say the other thing is around, again, if it's building a new product on a modern tech stack, a lot of these agentic coding tools allow you to move a lot quicker, but we're still seeing application on some of the legacy tech stacks as well, right? It still can help with, you know, deciphering what the code is, helping people kind of navigate code bases, even though the language isn't something that's widely trained on for an LLM. It's still kind of language and context at the end of the day, and the AI is actually quite good at that. So don't have any specific numbers off the top of my head, but, you know, there are applications and we are seeing, you know, productivity increases, and we're going to continue to kind of track those to see kind of the full extent going forward.
That's interesting. Glynn, anything to add there from your experience?
Yeah, so Dylan, my CTO, and the team, the preference is being Claude Code. So they've been working a lot with Claude Code, but actually really interesting from my CTO, he just uses Claude. So he doesn't use Claude Code. So he's effectively giving it preferences in terms of how he wants the code written and a lot more detail. And actually he just goes, here's a spec, write me a prompt to build the code, builds the code. He's then doing code reviews and working with it. And his level of productivity is shot up because he's obviously not writing lines of code. What he's become is effectively a system architect, and Claude is his senior developer. And then he's taken that to another level where he's put into the product of agentOS what I call no-code web applications, and I mentioned earlier no-code APIs and stuff. So he's given me, I'm not a coder, the ability to prompt and build a single file web application, a multi-file web application that automatically connects to our APIs and MCPs. He allows me to create API endpoints and MCP endpoints. So the coding products that are out there is one aspect, but you can also start to bring that into your own product by just having the ability to say, build me this. It then generates a coding prompt that you can run. You copy the code back in and you run it in your environment. So there's some real shifts in terms of what you can do with the AI coding tools.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe following on that, one of the questions that we've got in here is around the use of AI agents inside our businesses or products, and whether we view that as being fundamentally different from robotic process automation in some cases. So maybe do either of you have some examples around how we're thinking about agentic AI and using AI agents in our businesses?
Yeah, so I talk about the AI agent. So the approach is we've given it the information on here are all the nodes, all the controllers, here's the navigation of the software. And it's too big. So when the language model comes in, it goes, this thing's so large, I don't know. So actually, in the end, we effectively gave it its own user manual, bit of a pyramid. And what we're finding is it's not robotic. It's trying to solve a problem. So for me, is when it's navigating down in my world in the real estate space, it needs to identify who owes rent and chase them by text and email. Because the language model is reading and working these things out, it's running through. When it's unsure, it will start to present back. So that to me is a big difference from pretty much a coded approach, because that's robotic. Please follow this flow to deliver this outcome. The whole AI language model sitting on top, it works it out. And we use things like, we'll give it prompts. If you're not 90% plus sure, ask me. So where you would have a coded logic piece which would go and error out, the AI is going along and then starts stopping and saying, oh, I'm not sure if I should chase this person for rent. Can you confirm? So I suppose that really just highlights the difference between AI and the robotic, effectively coded, hard-coded approach.
Yeah, that's
and maybe just one small thing to add on that is the way that we see it is kind of part of the workforce to some extent. It's like a team member, right? So it can kind of make some decisions, but obviously you have to give it the context and the boundaries to make that decision within. Whereas I feel like, again, RPA is very much routine. Do A, then if it doesn't work, do B, and then do C, right? So there's no kind of room for kind of, I guess, problem solving or creativity in that process, which limits it.
We've got a few questions in about kind of different factors around governance. I'm summarizing from a few folks here, but maybe can you talk a little bit about how you've been thinking through questions around data privacy, security, and addressing that in sort of these AI rollouts? And then I think there was another element to that where we're talking about integrating humans into these processes at key functions, and then someone else asking about how we deal with hallucinations. So maybe just wrapping that all up into sort of a data privacy, accuracy, sort of governance question for you both, and how you're thinking through those challenges.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Just in terms of, I guess, the data security aspect of it, obviously we won't use any LLMs that are not enterprise grade, right? So we need to understand fully where the data is hosted, make sure that, again, in the T's and C's, that they're not training any of their models on our data or even our customers' data. And sometimes, again, our IT security teams take this very, very seriously. And that's why a lot of the times, even for our businesses, the guidance is start using or thinking about AI use cases internally first, so you can understand the boundaries of the technology before pushing it onto a customer, right? I think just again, if you're thinking about kind of governance in general, once it starts making kind of contact with customers, affects their workflows, their end users, that's another kind of heightened level of risk that you're adding. So just something that we typically think of as kind of best practice: start internally, understand the technology, understand what it's capable of doing before even extending it to a customer.
Yeah, and just jumping into the hallucination question, at the end of the day, people make mistakes. So they all interpret things very differently, and AI does the same. But you can, within the framework with language models, hallucinations ultimately come from be creative. If you don't know the answer, can you go and create something? So you can actually dial that down and even to some points turn it off to effectively say, if you do not know, and here's the knowledge base, here's all the information, do not guess, do not make it up. So that's really, the language models come a long way from the early days. And again, hallucinations can often come from a very generic prompt. So AI wants to generate something for you, it's going to go and generate it. So, we've found as we've been developing the AI agent, because it's gone off and found some tenants to chase rent that didn't exist. We're basically saying, why did you do that? And then you question, you drill in, and that helps you then develop, pretty much some of those, what I call guardrails, that side to stop those type of situations happening, as well as just getting the prompts, getting the agent to come back to you to say, I'm unsure, what would you like me to do?
And maybe just to add on kind of just one more kind of thing that we typically do to try and tackle some of the hallucinations is always like, especially for like critical workflows, we want to make sure there's a human in the loop, right? So it doesn't go off and do kind of autonomous action until it's approved or reviewed by a human. So that's one thing that we typically do. Another kind of small technique is also you can have, build voting systems, right? Or have agents check the output of another agent, right? So because they're non-deterministic, sometimes if there is a slip up or, agent saying to go right when it should go left, another agent might actually pick that up and flag it to you, right? So there are kind of ways to mitigate some of the hallucinations. I would say generally, they're part of the design of the LLM. To Glynn's earlier point, this is not a flaw in the system. It's just, part of how they've built, these systems in general.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, go ahead, Glynn.
Yeah, and then just talking about humans in the process. As I mentioned earlier, we focus on what's called an AI and people work chart. So the best way I can quickly explain it is imagine a spreadsheet, and across the top we've got Zendesk tickets come in, and you have all these actions. So we map out what is the job that needs to be done, and then underneath that we start to identify what can AI do, because sometimes it's 100% human. It's nothing to do with an AI process. We talk about the scheduling. So one thing that I realized very quickly is AI is 24/7. It can be swarm, it can be chain. There can be a lot of different scheduling. Then underneath we go, what do people do? And just as Jeff said, you might have a point where you need to check this outcome before it can continue, and also tied into their schedule. So there's a particular person that I recommend to follow on LinkedIn, which is a lady called Lisa Adams. And if you just search for Lisa Adams and type in AI work chart, you'll get to a newsletter. It's a really good overview explaining how people and AI collaborate together. And it's helped me really understand and sort of structure out our VBU, our business, to develop our own systems with our sort of digital companions.
Just as I know we're nearly at time here, I want a few minutes to wrap up, but maybe as a final question, I'll combine again a few here from the audience. But folks are looking for some practical guidance and tools that they might want to explore at the moment. So if there's kind of tools that you're seeing as particularly interesting across our business that folks are using, that would be interesting for folks to know. And then maybe also some of the we've got two questions, one on the low-hanging fruit in terms of use cases, but also on use cases that sort of span maybe more widely. So wondering about those two things, kind of tools that you find interesting and maybe some of the use cases that folks can think about today as they leave the call.
For me, the best tool is voice to text. As crazy as it is. So I've just started using a new piece called Whisper. So your thought process when you type a prompt is a lot different to your thought process when you speak it out. So I generally, when I interact with AI, I just hit record and it's voice to text, and I let it go and run through, and I tell it what I'm thinking, the challenges, the problems, or what I want to focus on, or what I want to build, and I just keep talking. Then I run. So as a tool, that's one of the most valuable tools, because if I sit down and try and type a coding prompt, or that way, it could be there for a long time, but actually just telling it speeds up that whole process, so you move a lot faster when you use voice to text.
Probably won't jump into all the tools, but I mean, there's a lot out there. I would say just in terms of like low hanging fruit, I think again, we started in the R&D kind of sphere because I think there's just a lot of natural application for Gen AI to help, right? Again, just like code knowledge, code navigation, testing, crawling the code, all of those types of kind of off the shelf, we think are very low hanging fruit. There's a handful of other kind of more operational things around, customer support, account management, sales and marketing. There's a bunch of those that are also now we're starting to see application at our businesses as well, right? But yeah, I think again, the problem set for AI is just so large. What we've really done, at least at the Volaris level, is trying to direct resources, break down those knowledge silos so that everyone can kind of benefit from the best practices, from that kind of shared learnings of, oh, this thing didn't work or this one did. We should really kind of pick it up and run with it. Like that's what we're really trying to facilitate so that we can actually get to low hanging fruit, quote unquote, actually across all functional areas of a business. It's not just kind of we're not just tackling just R&D specifically all the time, right?
That's excellent. Thanks, Glynn. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate this conversation. It's been great to dig into some of these challenges with you. And as we wrap up, I thought it might just be helpful for us to take a quick moment to think through some of the ways that we're approaching this at Volaris Group. I know a lot of this has come up today, but want to reinforce that we're approaching these questions with a really learning first orientation, thinking about ways that experimentation, pilots, peer-to-peer learning can address the AI challenge across the business. We're thinking about ways that AI can become a leadership fluency for us, so ways that our leaders can really take on this charge and build an AI first mindset, and then really providing some structural opportunities across Volaris Group to support these. So through our Center of Excellence that Jeff runs, portfolio level summits, hackathons, and sort of a structure that can help people thrive within this. So it's I think one of the wonderful things about our business model here at Volaris is we get sort of both sides of this. Our businesses can keep their identity and their operational independence while at the same time accessing some of these opportunities to thrive and grow in new ways with new learning and new knowledge. And so AI is no exception to the way that we're approaching this with that learning first culture. As we wrap up, I also want to reinforce, we will get back to everyone. I know we had a slew of questions come in, a lot of specific stuff as well. So we'll get back to everyone who provided a question. So do expect a follow-up email from us on those. And we're also getting back to everyone on this webinar with a copy of our upcoming white paper, which hopefully will also give you some more food for thought around how AI is impacting the vertical market software industry and some of the ways that vertical market software businesses can leverage their core strengths inside this new world of AI. So thank you all for spending an hour with us talking about these challenges. Really appreciate it. And feel free to get in touch if we can be of any support or guidance. Thanks all.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Glynn. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.